Hey everyone at Bear Valley Church, it's Critterman here. Boy, things are sure different this year. I really miss being able to come and visit you all in person. But that's okay. We're going to do something a little different. We're going to meet some of God's amazing animals virtually. And it's easy for me to say that they're amazing. After all, who made all of the animals? That's right, God did not just make the cute animals. Each and every animal that God made does something that's important. Well, I hope that by meeting these native Texas animals today and by learning about them, that you can understand them and always want to protect all of God's creatures and the places that they live. So gather the whole family around and join us as we meet some native Texas animals in Texas Wild. Yeah, if I look different when you meet the animals, that's because we did the animals first, and then I shaved, and then I'm recording this and the end of the program. So enjoy! At one time in Texas, there was a concentration of mammals that was absolutely massive. It was one of the largest concentration of mammals on the planet. There were 400 million of these particular animals living in one town. But not one of our towns. This animal builds their own town. Well, the animal that I'm actually talking about is an animal that is found on the prairies of Texas. This here is Raider, and Raider is a prairie dog. Now, prairie dogs are not really dogs, of course. They're actually a kind of squirrel, but they don't have a big bushy tail and they don't climb trees, although he does like to climb on me. They actually make their homes and live most of their lives underneath the ground. Now, it's actually kind of cool that they call the place that this animal lives a town. First of all, you know that you're in the middle of a prairie dog town when you see their city limit sign, which is kind of like a mound of dirt that sticks up above the ground. In the middle of that tunnel, right, are these, I should say in the middle of the mound of dirt are these tunnels. These tunnels drop almost 14 feet straight down to the ground. And those tunnels are kind of like the streets and the roads of the town. That's how they get from one part of the town to the other, to their neighborhood or ward, which is where they live in their own homes. Starting to sound really familiar, right? They even have rooms like we do. They have a bedroom, which is where they sleep at night. They have a nursery. That's where they feed for their young and care for them. They even have a kitchen or a dry room. That's where they store their food. Now, prairie dogs actually eat grass. Yeah, they eat a lot of plants, but not just grass. 250 prairie dogs eat about as much grass as one cow does every day, which a lot of ranchers and farmers didn't appreciate throughout history, especially those that came after Lewis and Clark. But the thing is that they didn't understand is prairie dogs also eat other plants, like shrubby, bushy trees, like that of the mesquite. So check this out. Prairie dogs will chew down mesquite as it tries to grow. Well, if mesquite does not get chewed down to the ground and it's able to establish its roots, those roots can go about 40 feet straight down to the ground, and they will steal every bit of moisture or water from all the other plants that are growing. So because prairie dogs are found on the prairies, there are all these other animals that benefit. As a matter of fact, there's about 150 species of animals that benefit from prairie dogs living out there. And how important are they? Well, there's actually 22 species of animals that would go extinct or disappear from the state of Texas if the prairie dog disappeared. That's what makes prairie dogs a keystone species, basically the key to survival for so many other animals. Now, how did this little squirrel get their name? Well, when prairie dogs come up out of the ground, they're a community, right? And they help each other look out for predators, coyotes and hawks and things like that. And when they come up out of the ground, well, a couple of the prairie dogs will take the role as a sentry. That's my button there, buddy. And what they'll actually do is they'll look out for danger. They'll stand up on top of that mound of dirt, which gives them a nice vantage point. And if a prairie dog sees danger, they will make a sound. And as you might guess, the prairie dog will bark. But don't think like a great big dog like a Doberman Pinscher or German Shepherd. They bark like a very small dog. And a little over 200 years ago, when a man by the name of Meriwether Lewis, of Lewis and Clark, wrote down in his journal what they'd seen one day, he did not write down that they saw a bunch of squirrels making barking noises. Nope, he wrote down the name Prairie Dog. And that's how this little squirrel got their name, one of the most important animals in Texas. Now, at one time, there was an animal that lived everywhere that prairie dogs lived. Here's the thing, they weren't exactly friendly neighbors though. It was an animal that was built for hunting and eating prairie dogs, a very long and skinny animal. That long and skinny animal was not a snake, come on people. This is Slinky. Slinky is a ferret. Now, the first thing I've got to tell you is that this is not the same kind of ferret that would have lived on the prairies where prairie dogs live. That was called the black-footed ferret. Now, I could not bring a black-footed ferret with me anywhere that I travel, even if I wanted to, because black-footed ferrets are one of the rarest mammals in this country. They're an endangered species. This here is a domestic ferret. He's a cousin of the black-footed ferret, and he's basically adapted or built the same way. So I can kind of demonstrate to people how some animals are adapted or built for doing very specific jobs. You know, the thing is, God, when he made the animals of the planet, each and every animal he made perfectly to do their job. And this animal is long and slinky. Check that figure out. Yeah, very long and skinny. They're built for living in tunnels. Now here's the thing. Even though the ferret can fit into the tunnels, does not mean it's going to be easy. First, when they go down underground, guess what they will see? That would be nothing. See, animals don't see in the dark. They see with very little light, and there's a big difference, okay? Underground, there's no light, and you can't take a flashlight out of his pocket and shine around because he doesn't have a flashlight or pockets, so that would be a problem. So ferrets use other adaptations or abilities that God gave them to do their job. Well, one of them he's using right now, and he does it a lot. No, not that one. The first one, smelling. Everything that you put in front of him, he will basically smell. And so they're very curious. They get information. Now, when they go down into the tunnels, they will smell the tunnels. They'll smell the dirt. And they can actually smell 2 different tunnels and tell which direction they've traveled. Now, the thing is when there's, kind of smelling things, well, it's not exactly like they can just walk up and smell a prairie dog to find them, right? But it gives them tons of information about how frequently the tunnels are used and which way they've gone. Now, as they're running through the tunnels, they'll use some other adaptations or abilities that God gave them. For instance, their hearing. Now, if you look, you probably notice his ears are quite small. On a prairie dog, the ears are even smaller because when you go into tunnels, well, you need to hold your ears up in order to use them. If you have great big ears like a rabbit, well, as soon as you go down the tunnels, you're gonna have to lay them down. Not very useful for hearing, right? So he has tiny little ears that he can hold up and they still fit in the tunnels so he can listen for the sounds of the prairie dogs. And they're actually listening for very specific prairie dogs. The babies, usually. Now, this is very hard for some people to accept, but predators, they don't like a fair fight. They want it to be easy. So they hunt for basically the same 5 kinds of prey. They hunt very, very young animals, very, very old animals, very, very sick animals, very, very injured animals, and very, very dumb animals. Now, I'm not trying to offend any animals out there at all, but what I'm saying is that predators, they're going after the easiest prey. And so they're actually making a wild population of prey stronger because they have to be smarter, stronger, and faster in order to survive, and they pass those things on to their young. Now, as the ferret's running through the tunnels, there's one more sense that he will use to help him navigate through the tunnels. Sticking out from the side of his nose there, those very long whiskers. Yeah, if you check this out, those whiskers right there, they stick out in pretty much every direction. He's smelling everything, and he can feel what's in front of him, and he can feel what's to the side. The whiskers that stick in front of his nose, well, they tell him what's in front of him, so he doesn't like crash into things, which should not be very good. The whiskers that stick out to the side tell him how much room he has. So if he comes to a dead end where a tunnel stops, he will always know if he's built to do what a ferret was built by God to do. That's to turn around in very tight spaces. Yeah, as you can see, the ferret has one of the most flexible backbones of there. And by the way, this doesn't actually hurt him. He sleeps in this position. It comes perfectly natural to him, right? Now, here's the thing. Seems like the ferret's pretty well built for hunting prairie dogs. So if they're so well built, well, what happened to his wild cousin, the black-footed ferret? Well, you might say they were too good at their job. And when a lot of ranchers and farmers came west, and they brought with them animals that ate a lot of grass, like sheep and goats and cattle and horses, well, you know, some people thought that if you were to get rid of all the prairie dogs, there'd be more grass for their animals to eat. Well, it's not exactly the way things work. You know, we're always trying to fix the things that God created, and we're really not very good at it. Usually we tend to mess things up, right? What they really ended up doing was they accidentally got rid of all of his wild cousins, the black-footed ferret. Because one of the methods that they used to try and control prairie dogs was to poison them. Well, if we poison a prairie dog, well, you're basically poisoning anything that would hunt and eat the prairie dog. So some of those ferrets were victims of secondary poisoning. They ate an animal that had eaten poison. And the other problem is that, well, diseases sometimes travel through wild populations, and some of those ferrets were catching a disease that went all through the population. And that's something that probably a lot of you can relate to right now that we're concerned about. Diseases are a big thing for animals, just like they are for humans. Well, here's the thing, though. When they found the last remaining black-footed ferrets on the planet, 18 of them on a ranch in Wyoming, and you can go look that up, They actually did something that at the time was considered controversial. They captured all of them, took them out of the wild, and they started something called the Black-footed Ferret Recovery Program. They actually worked with zoos and universities, and this Black-footed Ferret Recovery Program took 18 ferrets about 40 years ago or so, and through this program, they've had 4,000 black-footed ferret kits born. And today, well, if you check this out, you might find out that they've been releasing about 150 to 200 black-footed ferrets back out into the wild. So the lesson is that everyone makes mistakes, right? That's why we study history. We study history to learn about not just the great things we've done, but about the things that we didn't do right. Because we can do positive things with mistakes. Number one, we can learn from those mistakes. And number two, if we care enough, well, sometimes we'll even try and fix them. And that's kind of what the Black-footed Ferret Program is all about. And conservation takes decades. And it's also a reminder, again, of Noah's Ark. See, we can make a difference. God gave us this great, big, beautiful brain. We can do great things if we all work together. And that is Slinky, our ferret. Now, there are some animals that we share the planet with that some people are afraid of. And I will tell you that an animal does not look the way they do to scare you or to impress you. They look the way they do because it helps them to live and survive out in the wild. Well, the ferret hunts prairie dogs, and prairie dogs build pretty good sized tunnels. But what if you have a rodent that reproduces even faster than a prairie dog? And there's even more of them, and they're much smaller. Well, you're gonna need to be a little bit longer and skinnier to fit into those tunnels. This is Odin, and Odin is called a speckled king snake. Now, I really hope that some of you have family members at home watching with you, because I can tell you that a lot of people are afraid of snakes. A lot of people are afraid of snakes because they were taught to be afraid of snakes. As a matter of fact, as it turns out, a lot of adults were taught when they were growing up that the only good snake is a dead snake. Well, if you had your parents fill in that for me, they were one of the people that were taught that by Meemaw and Peepaw. Well, let me tell you, no matter what anybody tells you, that's simply not true. Snakes are actually one of the most important animals on the planet for us, for humans, for selfish reasons. First of all, snakes eat a lot of rodents like rats and mice. Rats and mice eat plants. Plants, that would be food sometimes, like farmers' crops. Our food. Well, do you like to eat food? I'm guessing the answer is yes. Well, if you like to eat food, you should probably learn to love snakes. Snakes do not eat farmers' crops. They eat the animals that are eating farmers' crops. So we actually benefit from that rodent control that snakes do. Now, of course, I can tell people that all day long, and they just don't care because they can't stand the way a snake looks. Some people think if you touch a snake, it would feel wet and slimy. Now, of course, Odin here looks very shiny, and that's because right before I brought Odin out in front of our camera today, Odin was swimming. He was actually in the water. Well, let me tell you, if something is wet and very smooth, it is definitely going to look wet because he is wet. But even if he had not been in the water, and those some animals that are trying to invade in on our video today, they're not making an appearance today. They're probably jealous of you, Odin. Let me tell you that snakes, even if they're not wet, they're going to look shiny for most species of snakes. And that's because their scales are very smooth. They reflect light. Things that are smooth do reflect light. Think like sequins or glitter. So a snake is not actually wet. They're simply shiny. Now, some people would say, okay, that's not too bad then. That's all right. But I don't like snakes because, well, they might be venomous. Well, venomous snakes are not bad snakes or mean snakes. They're snakes with consequences. Venomous snakes, well, there's no venomous snakes in the planet that eat people. Let's start with that one, right? And venomous snakes do not want to bite a human because they're not capable of eating a human, so what would be the point? Now, of course, some of them are very quickly to bite and use that venom as a form of defense, but that's really what the snake is, that venom is there for catching their prey, small things, and for defense. So, if you ever come across a snake, how can you tell if it's venomous? Well, okay, so go to college and get a degree in herpetology. Then you'll be a snake expert. Did you think I was going to tell you just learn 3 things? Well, yeah, that's not that simple. You can't just learn 3 things to identify every venomous snake on the planet, let alone Texas. Because red on black, friend of Jack, does not help you identify every snake. And you'd have to really only use it in North America with snakes that have all 3 colors. Then they'll tell you, look at the shape of the head. If it has a triangle-shaped head, it is a venomous snake. Well, someone might want to warn the bull snake and the hognose snake. Those are two native Texas snakes that have very pointy looking heads, and people kill them all the time simply because they have kind of a triangular shaped head. And then the third one, I don't know who came up with this one. They tell you to look at the snake's eyes, the pupils. Well, let me tell you, you would have to get your face very close to a snake in order to see their pupils. So, I'm quite a ways away from the camera here. Can you see his pupils? How about now? How about now? Well, if you can see them at this point, I will warn you that you are within striking distance right now. He could strike out and hit the camera from here. It's not that easy to see the pupils of a snake, and it doesn't tell you 100% every time, because really that shape of pupil, that line, that vertical pupil is what they call it. Well, you see that shape of pupil on non-venomous snakes like boas and pythons. So you can't tell just by the shape of the pupil every single time, and you're gonna have to get pretty close to use it, right? Now, of course, we have to address this one, because there is a fourth reason that people tell me that they don't like snakes, and it comes from a story in the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, right? So everyone remembers in the Garden of Eden, right? Who gave Eve the apple? Hold on, it wasn't an apple, it was the forbidden fruit, which represented forbidden knowledge, right? God wanted man to be innocent. And, what kind of animal was it that gave Eve the forbidden fruit? A snake. Well, actually, it was a serpent, right? So that is where a lot of people get their kind of feelings about snakes as maybe not being good, important animals. But you have to remember, God created all of the animals on the planet, not just the cute ones. Because there's another story from the Bible. Keep reading, it gets better, especially in the second part. Just read chapter 2, though. It's in Exodus. And there's a story about a man by the name of Moses. And he went before the Pharaoh with his brother Aaron. And Aaron was carrying the staff. Well, the Pharaoh was trying to show how powerful his gods were. He had all these gods. And so his wizards came out and they threw down these baskets, and all of a sudden all these venomous snakes appeared, right? Well, Aaron took the staff that he was carrying and he threw it down to the ground. And as we all remember, it turned into a beautiful butterfly. No, that's not right. Hold on. It turned into a dove. There's lots of doves, especially in the... No, that's not right either. Oh, yeah, it turned into a snake. And what did that snake do to the Pharaoh's snakes? It ate them. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Odin once again. Odin is called a speckled king snake. King. Why do they call him a king snake? Married to a queen, live in a castle? No. They call them king snakes because of a very unique ability that God gave them. They can hunt and eat and kill venomous snakes. That's right, you were looking at one of the few predators that God made on the planet that is built for hunting venomous snakes. So remember that the next time you hear someone here that say something like that the only good snake is a dead snake, maybe they've just never heard of a very cool snake that's found right here in Texas, and this is the speckled king snake. Some animals, well, they actually prefer to live close to people. You know, most wild animals tend to stay far away from human populations, but some animals have really adapted to living around humans. And I'm going to introduce you to an animal that does live around humans. A lot of you probably have seen one of these animals. And when I've heard a lot of people tell me that they've seen one of these animals, some people have actually told me that they saw something that I know must be impossible. They swear that they saw a giant rat as big as a cat. And if this were a rat, it would be one of the biggest ones you'd ever seen in your life. But this is not a rat. This is Trash Can. Yes, seriously, that's his name. Now, Trash Can, of course, is not a rat. This is an opossum, or if you prefer, possum. The O is apparently optional in Texas. It's the same animal. Now, I could understand how someone could mistake an opossum for being a giant rat. I mean, they got a pointy nose, whiskers sticking everywhere, and a weird hairless tail. Now, this weird hairless tail is actually the first thing that makes an opossum different from a rat. Notice that I'm holding on to his tail. I could pick him up by his tail. Now, I can promise you I could not pick a cat up by their tail. They don't like it. The opossum actually has a very special tail, though. It's a prehensile tail. Prehensile just means to hold or grab onto something. So think of this as like the safety line of the opossum when they're climbing up in trees, or if they're trying to lower themselves down into the bottom of your trash. Now the tail makes them different, but it's not the biggest difference between an opossum and a rat. I would have to say the biggest difference is probably their cousins, their family tree. This is a cousin of the kangaroo and the koala. Yeah, now I know what you're thinking. His cousin's got all the looks in the family, right? So why are they a cousin of the kangaroo and the koala? Well, that's because when this guy was born, he was about the size of a jelly bean. But the day he was born, he climbed up his mother's belly and down into her pouch. Yeah, marsupials are animals that carry their young in a pouch. Now, I would love to show everyone his pouch, but I cannot show you his pouch because he is a boy. That's right, only the girls have a pouch. The girl kangaroos, the girl koalas, and the girl opossums have a pouch. Now, don't be surprised if you ever see an opossum in your neighborhood or backyard. There are actually more opossums in Texas today than there were 200 years ago. That's because there's more of us. See, opossums are scavengers. They look for free food wherever it is, up in a tree, down by the water, if you feed any of your pets outside in your backyard, even right out of your trash. Now, they're not eating trash. They just eat stuff that you put in there that you might not think is, edible anymore. Like, I don't know, banana peels and apple cores. Yeah, we don't really eat those. They'll eat those. They'll also eat things we'd never consider eating, things that I'm sure none of you want to eat, ticks and snakes. Actually, opossums are considered very beneficial animals, and people are finally starting to appreciate them for that role that they do in keeping parasites and, well, little annoying things like those ticks under control, and of course, keeping snakes under control. That is their job. Now, here's the thing. The opossum, they are a very important animal out in the environment because of that scavenger role that they play. They kind of fill a niche. You kind of think of them as one of the animals that are nature's cleanup crew. But if you ever see an opossum, please don't try and get too close to them, touch them, or pick them up. I know I'm sharing a lot of animals with you, but these animals are not my pets. These animals came to our organization because they needed a home for one reason or another. Someone actually found this guy when he was about the size of my fist, and they thought that, his mother had left him behind and he needed help. What they didn't understand is that by the time the opossum's about the size of your fist, if they have their hair and their eyes are open, they can survive and take care of themselves. So please leave them alone. Now, of course, someone didn't leave him alone. They brought him home and tried to keep him and treat him as a pet. He will never think and act like a pet. He's always going to think and act like a wild animal. For instance, if a stranger walked up to him right now and tried to get too close to him or touch him or pick him up, he would do to you the same thing that a wild opossum would do. It looks like this. Which looks like they're crazy, or they have rabies or something like that. Well, they don't have rabies. Well, opossums are actually one of the few mammals that do not get rabies. Are they crazy? Well, come on, we're all a little crazy people. Who said crazy is a bad thing? But they're not crazy either. They're actually just showing off their teeth, and they can hold their mouth open for hours at a time until danger goes away. Now, even though that is what an opossum will do first, show off those 50 razor-sharp teeth, that's not what they're famous for doing. What they're famous for doing sounds like they're playing their own game. It's called playing possum, which means they'll play dead. But this is not a game. They're not great actors. When the opossum's in a lot of danger, they become so nervous that they basically faint. Their heartbeat slows down, their breathing slows down, and to make it really believable, their body will produce an odor that makes them smell like they've been dead for a while. And let me tell you, that is not a pleasant smell. But it is a smell that convinces most predators to go look for a better, fresher smelling meal. So the opossum can protect himself with just a little bit of acting. Yes, they're one of the great animal actors. And that is our friend Trash Can, the opossum. Now, an opossum can defend themselves as long as they know that they're in danger. The problem is that they're not always going to know if they're in danger. I've actually got with me one of the best night hunting animals on the planet. It's sometimes known as the winged tiger. This is Luna. And Luna is a great horned owl. Now, the great horned owl has stripes like a tiger, and they have weapons like a tiger. Now, of course, birds don't have teeth, but they do have razor-sharp talons. The talons on my glove there, well, they're about the size of a tiger's claws, and if Luna wanted to, and I were not wearing this glove, Luna could actually squeeze and has enough strength to put those talons all the way through my hand. That is a killing weapon of the great horned owl. Now, of course, as a predator, you can have the greatest weapons in the world, but it doesn't do you any good unless you can actually find something to use them on. Well, let me tell you, the owl is one of the most amazing animals on the planet. As I said, they're one of the best night hunting animals on the planet, and they're also an inspiration for us humans. You know, some of the greatest inventions that we have on this planet were actually inspired by animals like the owl. So, first of all, you want to see things that are really far away. Well, you have to have pretty good eyesight. And anybody that wants to see things that are really far away with our human eyes can only see so far. Well, we use binoculars. Or if we want to see something at night, a telescope. Well, the owl's eyes are absolutely massive. If you and I were built like this owl, each of your eyeballs would be about roughly the size of an orange or a grapefruit in your head. Yes, we'd all look surprised all the time. Those are big eyes. Now, those great big eyes, they allow them to focus on things that are really far away, but they also leave a lot of room for a very large mirror. Owls have something called a tapetum. Its cells reflect light. Well, it takes what little light there is and makes it even brighter. By the way, the world's best telescopes have great big lenses and mirrors. It's what allows us to see the stars so far away. And each of an owl's eye is just like a telescope. Now here's the problem. Great big eyes do allow the owl to see a mouse or rat running across a field from like a half mile away sometimes in the right conditions. But they take up so much room in their skull, they're so big that their eyeballs don't move at all. See, our eyeballs move all over the place. Like, just imagine if mom or dad embarrassed you right now, right? Did something and everyone saw them doing it. You might roll your eyes. Oh my gosh, that was so embarrassing. Well, an owl cannot roll their eyes at their parents or anybody because their eyeballs do not move. They have fixed vision, which means their eyes are always pointing straight forward. So if you can see the owl looking at me and you can see my finger, well, if you watch my eyeballs, I can look at the owl and then look at my finger without moving my head, right? I can actually follow that back and forth. Well, an owl's eyes do not work that way. So if an owl wants to see something that's over to the side, they have to turn their whole head. And they can turn their heads really far. How far? Not all the way around like in the cartoons. That's a full circle, 360 degrees. They can turn their head almost all the way around. 270 degrees, or 3/4 of the way around. By the way, if you're interested in learning fractions, bake a pie. It's always a good way to teach fraction. Yeah, you get to eat one piece of the pie. That's 1/4 of the pie. That's about 90 degrees. The other 3/4 of the pie, that's 270 degrees. That's how far they can turn their heads. So the owl can turn their head almost all the way around. And their best sense is telling them when and where to look. And it's not the eyesight. That's the second best sense. The best sense is their hearing. Now, those things on top that you're looking at, those are not ears. Those are just feathers. That's how they got the name great horned owl. When they hold them up, especially from a distance, they look like they have little horns. The ears are actually just large holes underneath the feathers. And check this out. On one side of their head, the ear is up high. On the other side, it's down low. That's called asymmetrical hearing, or as I prefer, crooked. Now that seems kind of weird that they have crooked ears, but do you know who else has crooked ears? All of you watching this right now. That's right, you all have crooked ears. And yeah, take your hands off the side of your head like you think there's something wrong with you. It's normal, okay? You're supposed to have crooked ears. Think about it. We don't just have one ear stuck in the middle of our heads. You would definitely notice that on me. We have one over here and one over here. Why? Well, how would I know that a sound is coming from on this side of my head? Well, sound travels through the air, creates sound waves, right? And that sound wave will travel to this ear before this one, telling my brain up here to look over in that direction. Well, think about this. Owls, they don't just hunt things that are on the ground, like rats and mice, or opossums. They can also hunt things that fly, like birds and bats. If a sound has come from a bird or a bat or an airplane up high, which ear do you think it'll reach first? The ear up high. Yeah. See, yeah, have you ever looked down when an airplane flies overhead? Probably not, right? So our ears are just a tiny bit crooked, and owls' ears are really crooked. And what is he catching sound with? Their entire face. It's called a facial disc. Yeah, the feathers actually catch the sound and send it into the holes underneath the ears. And that, by the way, is also where they got the idea maybe for satellite dishes that catch signals from space. It's just they don't get any satellite TV. So that's pretty amazing. But you know what? They're still studying owls. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of universities that have studied owl feathers. Because owls, well, they hunt at night, The light from the sun, by the way, does not hurt his eyes. His pupils will adjust to the amount of light. But they really are built for hunting at night because they don't have to compete. See, there's hawks and eagles that are out hunting during the day. Owls, though, because they can see so well with very little light, where other birds cannot, that they can take advantage of that. And owls are not the fastest flying birds in the world, but they are amongst the strongest birds in the world and the quietest flying birds in the world. So there's actually universities that are studying the shape of the flight feathers of the owl to tell exactly how they're able to accomplish this, the very quiet flight. So the owl hears their prey, they turn their head and they know exactly where to look, and they'll stare in that direction, like maybe he saw a mouse just now. And he'll wait until that animal moves out into the open. And once they're out in the open and they think they've got a chance, that's when they'll make their move. And their prey will never hear them coming until it's too late. See, the owl, one of the most amazing animals that has inspired so many of our human innovations, and that is Luna, our great horned owl. All right, so now I'd like to introduce you to one of the most beautiful, majestic birds in all of Texas. Keep in mind, they do say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, I have a great big heart for animals, and this is the very beautiful Uncle Fester, our turkey vulture. Yes, this is what I was talking about. You don't think he's beautiful? Maybe not from up close, right? I know what you're thinking. Well, here's the thing. It is amazing to watch a turkey vulture when they're flying high up in the sky. A turkey vulture can soar for hours at a time without ever flapping their wings. So if you see a big black bird soaring around, chances are you're looking at a turkey vulture. Now, how are they able to soar for so long without flapping their wings? Well, it's not just the length of their wings. That's important. It's also the way because of the way God made them. See, vultures have this amazing ability, a God-given talent, you might say, for finding thermals. Thermals are simply pockets of hot air. Hot air rises. That's what makes a hot air balloon go up. Well, they can find these pockets of hot air and ride them almost like an elevator, a couple thousand feet up into the sky, right? And they can circle around and float on the air, and if they get too low, they just repeat the process all over. They can do this all day long. This is important for the turkey vulture because they might be up there for a while before they find a meal. Because vultures don't have great eyesight like a hawk or an owl. They don't have great hearing like an owl. But they do have a sense that most birds do not have. A sense of smell. Most birds cannot smell anything. A turkey vulture, they can smell their food from up to 2 miles away. That is because they like their food prepared a special way. That might have something to do with it. Dead. Yeah, the scientific term is carrion. Vultures eat stuff that's been dead, and it's been dead for a while. Now, what causes a smell that attracts them? Well, when an animal dies, its immune system shuts down, and all these gases build up from the billions of bacteria inside the animal's body. And these gases float up into the air. When a turkey vulture smells that, it means it's dinner time. They'll follow that stinky scent lower to the ground until they can see it. Once they see it, the idea is to be the first one there. So a vulture will fly down, land on the ground, kind of hop over on top of the rotting carcass sometimes, stick their bald red head right down in and eat all the good stuff. Whatever that is. That does explain why the vulture's built the way they are. No feathers in the head, no feathers in the legs, and something you can't see, a very special stomach. Vultures have some of the most powerful stomach acids of any animal on the planet. They can swallow and eat stuff that would kill just about any other animal that tried to eat it. The very powerful acids in their stomach will kill those things. Now, when they're done eating, though, they will have some of this bacteria on their head and on their legs, so they'll get cleaned up. Well, if you've ever seen a vulture sitting on top of a fence post or a telephone pole, holding their wings out and holding their head up like that, they're cleaning themselves with the sun. See, vultures, the natural radiation that the sun puts out every day, well, it kills the bacteria on top of their head. Now, of course, if I stand out in the sun for too long, my hand's going to look like his head is, right? So I can get sunburned. He does not. But that sunlight actually kills the bacteria on top of their head. Now, that's how they clean their head. But the way they clean their legs is a little different, you might say. It's called urine washing. Yes, urine washing. Peeing down their legs. Now, don't try that at home. Doesn't work for people. The reason it works for a vulture is that those stomach acids are very powerful. Well, it also makes their urine more acidic. So when most birds urinate, they shoot it away from their body. Not the vulture. No, they let it run straight down their legs. His legs are actually the same color as his head. It's just difficult to tell that most of the time because they're covered in urine. Yes, very lovely. It's also part of the reason why I'm wearing a glove. Yeah, you wash yourself your way, and I'll wash myself my way. Actually, what he's doing is he's actually preening himself right now. He's actually kind of pulling things off the feathers. You can't pull bacteria off your feathers by preening. That's just how they kind of release oils into their feathers. It's kind of how they make their feathers into somewhat of a raincoat. Now, what I just told you, very gross and disgusting. Well, a lot of things so far. They eat dead stuff, and they have an unusual way of sanitizing themselves. But let me tell you, there is something the vulture does that's probably even more disgusting than those two things. It has to do with danger. See, vultures, they're opportunistic animals. They are only eating carrion stuff that they find that's already dead. So they really don't know when they're going to have an opportunity to eat. So when they do eat, well, they tend to eat as much food as they possibly can, which is fine most of the time. But every once in a while, there could be a problem. Like, say he's eating something that was hit by a car out in the middle of the road. And he's eating a big meal, and all of a sudden he looks up, and there's like a semi-truck racing at about 60 miles an hour. Well, that would be an emergency. Well, in an emergency situation, he can't carry a whole lot of weight up into the air, like owls can carry lots of weight. Fortunately, they do have a unique way of lightening the load very quickly. They will vomit, hurl, toss your cookies. Let's just use a scientific term. They will regurgitate. Blah. Sounds disgusting, right? But it works. It lightens the load. Now, I know what you're thinking. That wasn't that bad. Well, that's not the gross part. The gross part is that when the vulture regurgitates a meal out of their body, that lightens the load. They can fly away from the danger. And, well, since they still don't know when they're going to have another opportunity to eat, they'll just circle around and wait for the danger to pass. And once the danger's passed, they will fly back down and eat it all up again. Yes, they eat their own food twice. Yes, now I know some of you might be thinking, yes, that is disgusting. Why did you tell me that? Well, those are the facts, people. I'm sorry, I just can't make up things here. But let me tell you that it actually is not that unusual because birds, that's how they feed their babies anyway. They regurgitate food into their mouths, typically back at the nest. Now, yes, I've talked mainly about gross, disgusting things when it comes to the vulture, but I still insist on calling them one of the most beautiful, majestic birds that God ever put on this planet. Because let me tell you something, that in nature, eventually everything dies. Everything. And this is nature's cleanup crew. And there is no amount of money in the world you could pay this guy to do this bird's job. So I appreciate all of God's creatures, no matter what they look like. Thank you, Uncle Fester. You and the rest of the vultures keep up the good work, my friend. Don't know if you all realize it or not, but as we've been meeting these native Texas animals, we've actually met animals that are a part of food chains, food webs. You know, every animal is attached to other animals, and that's how we talk about protecting all animals, and more importantly, their ecosystems, the places that they live, because animals depend on each other for their very survival. So we have animals at the bottom of the food chain, like the prairie dog, those plant-eating animals. We have the predators that hunt them, things like ferrets and snakes and owls. We have animals that complete that circle of life, like the turkey vulture. And then, of course, we have predators at the very top of the food chain. Now, there's a special name for animals at the very top of the food chain, apex predator. You know, there's not that many apex predators on the planet. Over in Asia, you have the tiger. Deep in the ocean, a great big fish with powerful jaws, right? The shark. And right here in Texas, we have our very own apex predator. But this is an animal that might surprise some of you. Let me introduce you to Bindi. Bindi is an American alligator. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can tell that this is an alligator and not a crocodile. But the easiest way to tell that this is an alligator and not a crocodile would be by our theme today. We're meeting native Texas animals, and crocodiles are not native to Texas. But we do have quite a few American alligators. But that wasn't always the case. About 100 years ago, the alligator almost disappeared from our state. Today, there's about, they estimate, 500,000 alligators in Texas. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but alligators, they are connected to the environment and they play a very important role. Now, yes, there's a lot of alligators. Now, even though there's a lot, don't bother trying to get one as a pet. It's illegal. This is not my pet alligator. I have to have special permission from Texas Parks and Wildlife to give Bindi here a home and to share her and bring her to education programs, which I hope to return to doing as soon as this is all over. But here's the thing, you wouldn't want to have an alligator as a pet anyways. Bindi here is a little over a year old, right? You see how big she is now. She can crush about 50 pounds with her jaws, roughly. She's not done growing, not by a long shot. So the biggest alligator on record was about as long as a car and weighed almost 1,000 pounds. At that size, an alligator can crush about 4,000 pounds with their jaws, which basically means if a big alligator got a hold of something and you wanted it back, you'd have to be strong enough to lift a car off the ground to pry their jaws apart. It's pretty amazing, right? And of course, their jaws are not the only weapon of this predator. Their tail is as well. Now, you notice I'm holding onto the tail. This is muscle right in here. It's all muscle. They swing their tail like a baseball player swinging a baseball bat. It is designed to knock their prey into their jaws. They actually work together. Now, this tail is not that strong right now, but when this alligator weighs even just as much as your average adult human, well, they could break a human leg with one swipe of their tail. They are a big, tough, powerful predator. So does that mean we should try and get rid of all the alligators in Texas? Well, it's an interesting question. Would anyone ever suggest that we get rid of all the dolphins out in the ocean? Probably not, because they're cute and make funny sounds. But let me tell you, the alligator and the dolphin actually have a lot in common. They're both predators. Difference is, dolphins hunt in the water, right? Alligators can hunt in the water or on land. An alligator can actually run 30 miles an hour on land. Now, you could have some fun with this one. Go look up and see how fast Usain Bolt can run. He is considered the fastest man alive. Well, an alligator can run faster than Usain Bolt. Difference is, they don't have a 20-meter race in the Olympics. It's a 100-meter dash. Alligators can only reach that top speed for a very short distance, but they don't usually have to outrun anybody because they are the ones chasing down the prey. That quick burst of speed gives them advantage to catch a meal. Now, even though they can move quickly on land, that's not really where they're best adapted for hunting. They're best adapted for hunting in the water. So they've got those webbed feet down there. The tail is actually very flat at the end there and helps them to propel themselves through the water. And all of their senses are on the top part of their head. The eyes, the ears, which are the dark line behind the eye there, right over there, and their nostrils are all on the top of their head. Did I mention that Bindi likes finger food? I've got all mine, by the way. Yeah, so they can actually just stick the top part of their head up above the water. And the amazing thing to me about every single one of these Texas animals is they're all perfectly built by God to do their job. Because if you look carefully, right, at the back there, you see how those scales seem very thick and bumpy. And if you were to look, you might be able to imagine the pattern of the bark of a tree. When an alligator is hunting in the water, where they're best built for it, they stick just the top part of the head up above the water, the eyes, the ears, and the nose. They can see what's going on, right? And those bumpy scales, they look almost exactly like a log floating in the water. Their prey almost never has an opportunity to even know that they're being hunted. And even then, the alligator, if they do spot prey, they're usually far away from them. And when they go after their prey, they sink below the water, and you won't know which direction they're going. An alligator can hold their breath for 2 hours, which means if you approach them in a boat, you won't know which direction they went. They can pretty much swim across just about any lake in Texas if they want to. You're never going to know where they went. Well, here's the thing. I know an alligator looks like a fierce, dangerous animal, but they're perfectly built for hunting in water and around water. And 500,000 alligators does sound like a lot. But let me tell you, God does not make mistakes. He made everything absolutely perfect. See, there's another plant-eating animal that lives in Texas. It's related to the prairie dog. It is called the nutria. It's also related to the beaver. Now, beavers, you're probably familiar with those. They get the big flat tail. They are giant rodents, one of the biggest rodents in the world. The nutria are the same size. Yeah, they can weigh 40 to 60 pounds. Imagine a rat, 40 to 60 pounds. That's the size of a kindergartner, right? That's a big size animal, and they have webbed feet, and they're built for, basically swimming around water, eating plants. They can be very destructive, though, if left unchecked. So if you have a supersized plant-eating animal, you better have a supersized predator built to hunt them. And the biggest predator in all of Texas is the American alligator. So, what do y'all think? Those are some pretty cool animals, aren't they? Well, here's the thing. Not only are they interesting and amazing and even beautiful in their own way that God made them, they're all important. See, that's all I really care, is that people learn to appreciate God's creation and let it bring you closer to God. God loves us. He gave us the air that we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat, all the amazing plants and animals that we're lucky enough to share the planet with. But you know, God did not love us just enough to give us this ability to live on planet Earth. He loves us so much that he sent out into the world someone to show us how we should all try and live our lives. Yes, we celebrate his birth at Christmas, and at Easter we celebrate what he did upon the cross for all of us, Jesus. And so the next time you see any of God's creatures, let it bring you a little bit closer to that love that God has for each and every one of us. And God bless you, and I can't wait to see you all hopefully in person in the future at Bear Valley Church. All right, I hope to be there. For more information, visit Critterman.com.